This is a book about recovery, by which I mean to say that we have lost something that we can and must apprehend again. What we confess, that is, our theology, piety, and practice. I shall use the word reformed mainly to denote the theology, piety, and practice of the Reformed and Presbyterian churches, not as a proper name of any particular denomination or federation. One of the major questions to be pursued is the relation between the word reformed and the thing itself. Is the word reformed merely a convention, a way of speaking, or does it have an objective referent? I contend that the word denotes a confession, a theology, piety, and practice that are well known and well defined and summarized in ecclesiastically sanctioned and binding documents. By confession, I mean narrowly the 16th and 17th century Reformed confessions, which we might call the six forms of unity. That is, Belgic Confession, BC, HC, Canons of Dort, CD, Westminster Confession of Faith, WCF, Westminster Larger Catechism, WLC, and Westminster Shorter Catechism, WSC. So the first sense of the word is ecclesiastical dogma. Second, and more broadly, however, I mean the understanding of those confessions as articulated by the classical 16th and 17th century Reformed theologians and by those who continued that tradition, the outlines of which are evident to anyone who reads Calvin, Ursinus, Willebius, Owen, Turretin, Witsius, Hodge, Bavinck, and Berkhoff. Third, by confession I mean the theology, piety, and practice agreed upon by our churches, held in common by them, which bind us together, by which we have covenanted to live and worship together. So that, as used in this work, confession is a rich, multi-layered term that has both fixed and developing aspects. Ecclesia reformata, semper reformanda. In good Reformed fashion, this book has two grammatical moods, imperative and indicative. First, we shall consider, as it were, the law. Second, we shall consider the good news, as it were, about being reformed and some paths to recovery. Much of what passes as reformed among our churches is not. Its sources, spirit, and methods are alien to Reformed theology, piety, and practice. There are significant segments within the Reformed communion that define Reformed in ways that our forefathers would not understand. For example, some define the Reformed identity according to one's view of the length of the creation days. Others define it according to one's view of the post-canonical application of Mosaic civil laws. And still others speak as if the Reformed confessions were ambiguous about covenant theology and the doctrine of justification. Practically, we have become fragmented. In our age, it seems that every definition of Reformed is regarded as valid, and none is definitive. Consider the effect of such fragmentation when looking for a Reformed congregation. One shall have to choose between the contemporary, emerging, traditional, theonomic, federal vision, psalm-singing, neo-Puritan, and confessional congregations, to name but a few possibilities. In nearly every case, the adjective confessional is not sufficient to describe accurately the theology, piety, and practice of a given congregation. It is not that there are no ordinary Reformed churches about which one could say confessional without qualification, but such do seem to be in the minority. Rather than being the single common denominator among Reformed congregations, confessional has become simply one adjective among many. How can that be? Have not all Reformed ministers and elders subscribed a Reformed confession before God and His Church, swearing to uphold, teach, and defend the same? If so, are we not all morally obligated to be confessional? If we are not, how did this happen? It is the argument of this book that the Reformed confession is the only reasonable basis for a stable definition of the Reformed theology, piety, and practice. As a class of churches that profess allegiance to the Reformed theology, piety, and practice, as revealed in God's Word and summarized in the Reformed confessions, we have